friends, we have a special guest with us today. Pauleanna Reid is joining us. Pauleanna is a listener of the podcast, which we've had quite a few listeners on our show this year. And I love being able to feature you all because you represent what this show is all about. So welcome, Pauleanna.
Very nice to meet you. Excited to be here.
Amazing. So, Pauleanna, you are a celebrity ghostwriter. You have an agency,
Yes.
WritersBlok, which I think is such a fun moniker. It's spelled BLOK, by the way, for those of you listening. So, it's a fun play on words. We'll get into a little bit more of the context around your business before we jump into today's case study about how you scaled your agency from 6 figures to 7 figures. But before we do that, as you already know, I have to ask you, what is your Cubicle to CEO story?
My Cubicle to CEO story starts as a girl who struggled in school. So oftentimes, I think we get stuck in this gray area when we're in college and university. And I had no idea what my path would look like. I always knew I wanted to be in communications. I wanted to be a writer of some sort, but we're talking 2007, 2008, where blogging was just emerging during that time. So I listened to mommy and daddy. I listened to the adults in my world. And instead of following a path that I wanted, I actually ended up taking an office administration course, dropped out of school my second year because I hated it so much, but ended up in the corporate world as an executive assistant to presidents and CEOs for 10 years. So 2009 until 2019. And I worked my ass off. I'm a firm believer in the fact that your attitude really matters, no matter how much you hate the circumstance. And I leveraged that opportunity to really learn the business. I asked questions. I asked my bosses to help me read the sales reports. I wanted to know what all the acronyms meant. I scheduled 20-minute coffee dates with all the heads of the departments over the years. I had mentors. So, I really squeezed the juice out of the opportunity. And I've always been a side hustler. I think that the government doesn't really have a safety net for many of us coming up. And so I knew that the number that they presented me on the offer letter was what the company could afford, but it was never going to amount to my true value. And so with that being said, I nearly tripled my income from my side hustle. And there were two things that were really, really important to me when I decided to quit. Number one, that I paid down as much debt as possible. So I paid down just over $50,000 in debt before I left. And number two, that I had a proven track record of sales. So I could look back one year and it was like on paper in black and white, proof that I could sell and proof that my numbers were strong. And that gave me the confidence to leave. I think some people, you do this double dutch in your head, right? You want to leave, but then you're scared. But my father is, he was a lieutenant in the military and he believes in structure and routine. And so I had a plan, and the plan is what really helped me cure my fears.
Wow, I am so impressed by you, most of all in how much you made, like you said, the most of that opportunity as an executive assistant. I think that there really is almost no better role within a company than being the right-hand person for someone in a leadership position like that, because you are privy to so many conversations and rooms that you would never have access to in almost any other role. And to be able to ask those additional questions to learn so many skill sets beyond, what your role was responsible for. Just the fact that you took the time to understand what you were delivering, like those sales sheets, and not just saying, okay, let me hand off this paper because it's not my job to know. I think that's massively impressive. It is obviously no accident that you are such a successful entrepreneur as a result of that. Give the listeners a little bit of just like an understanding of what you do at WritersBlok so that it helps them kind of envision, as we're going through today's case study, your journey from 6 to 7 figures in the agency world. Who are your primary clients for WritersBlok, and what is the primary service that you're providing there?
Absolutely. So at WritersBlok, I am the founder and chief storytelling officer, widely known as a celebrity ghostwriter. I lead an all-women team, an all-women of color team, and I'm really proud of that, and that was very intentional. What makes us set apart from the rest of our competitors, which is typically white, male dominated agencies is our cultural competency. Clients just don't hire us to put pen to paper. They hire us to be structural thinkers, to decode their ideas, to help them read the room, to help them navigate cultural, societal, generational sensitivities. We are their human diaries. And so it's far beyond just putting pen to paper. Clients hire us because they trust us to build their legacies. And so our main services are books and keynote speeches, but the life cycle of our client relationship spans many years because once we do one project for a client, they want us to do all projects. So anything they say, anything they write, it could be scripts for video, it could be captions, it could be presentation decks to investors. I once got asked to pen a thoughtful thank you text to Oprah on behalf of a client. And so I think clients really, really understand the importance of communications and how it can either ignite wars or bring peace to a situation. Someone once told me that before you can change business and policy, you have to change hearts and minds. And so now we're seeing with the WGA strike how important and critical writers are in our ecosystem. You and I are both, we're chilling and we're sitting on chairs, but these chairs would not exist without a blueprint. The songs that we sing in the shower, there was a writer who wrote that, right? And so I love being behind the scenes. I think most people underestimate the power of being behind the scenes. And when cancel culture erupted years ago, I used to ask myself, well, who the hell is advising these people? And I wanted a seat at the table. And being a celebrity ghostwriter, being a communications aide, an advisor gives me and my team a seat at the table.
That's really interesting, this point that I guess I didn't, I mean, it's true, but I didn't really, I think, feel this way until you just said what you said. Writers are artists. They're not often seen as artists,
Right.
but they are in their cultural influence, like you mentioned, and how so much of what we consume, both in forms of media, entertainment, and education, are directly built on the work of writers. So I absolutely see the value that the work that you do brings to society at large. I am curious, I'm sure most of our listeners are as well. I don't know if you're allowed to say, because with some ghostwriting contracts you can't, but for the clients that you are able to disclose, what has been either your favorite project that you've worked on, or who has been your favorite client that you've had the honor of working with?
So, on a macro level, we work with celebrities, star athletes, politicians, founders, and executives. At a micro level, it's very hard for me to broadcast names because ultimately people hire ghostwriters because we're a ghost. We're a secret, hidden content ninja. But if I were to say the most meaningful project that we've ever worked on to date, we wrote a speech for someone who spoke at George Floyd's funeral. And so
Wow.
oftentimes we are called when there is high stakes, high crisis, highly sensitive content needs to be written. Other projects that we love is when we get to so graduation season just wrapped up. So we did several commencement speeches. And so imagine we're working with influential figures who are speaking life into the next generation of leaders. We're ultimately in a position to shift the way they see themselves in the world, right? So when we're at those crossroads, when I think about the work and the impact that we make, to me it moves me in ways that I can't even articulate, simply because I just don't think people really understand the power of words and how it can change the trajectory of someone's life. Ultimately, clients hire us to help them stay connected to their audiences, communicate to their audiences at scale, stay relevant, and put them in a position where they can turn conversations into leads. When I sit down with a client, the first thing I assess is their proximity to a topic. And then I assess, what do you want to stand for? What are your morals, your values, your belief system? What do you want to fight for? What conversations do you want to contribute to? I have to say that when I hear the word influencer, it has many different meanings, but I truly feel that if you are in a position of power and influence, you need to do and say something with it or get the hell out of the way, for those of us
Mhm.
that do.
I really like your strong viewpoints on things. I think that's what makes you an appealing choice for the people who work with you, right? They also have strong viewpoints. And so I'm actually going to hit you with an early hot take before we jump into the more methodical roadmap that you took getting your agency to seven figures. And that is, you, I mean, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that proximity is powerful. And getting yourself in the right rooms where opportunities are being created is key. You even showcase that a little bit in your cubicle life, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd love for you to share with our listeners your story of how you landed your first five-figure contract, that belief.
That's such an exciting story. Okay. So when I was in the corporate world, I think it's really important as a lesson to the listeners when you know that your end result is not the corporate arena, you should be very strategic with what job you enter. So there are a few things that were important to me. And one of those things was unlimited PTO because I could leverage that time off for business trips. I never took a vacation in the 10 years that I was in corporate Canada. And so I would leverage these business trips and I would go, and I knew that in order for me to excel, I'd have to build pockets of networks in all the major cities. So New York, LA, DC, Atlanta. Now, I'm Canadian. I think it's really important for everyone to know I'm born and raised in Toronto, Canada, but I spend half the year in the States. Now, Toronto, talking about proximity, I believe it's a opportunity desert, right? You hit your ceiling very early in your career. You hit your ceiling in your network, in how much you can make. We don't have celebrity culture. If you look at anyone from The Weeknd to Drake to Shania to Bieber, a lot of people ended up going to the States. And so when I would go to the States, I would build my relationships online. And I think it's very important for everyone to understand how important it is to transfer those relationships offline. I didn't have a lot of money, right? And so I know some people look at opportunities or a conference or a course and say, how am I, like they're in an abundance deficit, right? How am I going to get the money? I would skip paying my phone bill so I could pay for a flight or a train ticket, and I would just go and I would book coffee dates from morning to night, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. There are many a times where I would sleep literally on the airport floor because I couldn't afford a hotel, or I'd bum it on a friend's couch. Like I just knew that this was going to be a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. One of those days while I was in New York, and I love New York because of the energy and how electric it is. You can literally bump into anyone, anytime that can change your life. I was sitting in the lobby with a friend of mine, and a gentleman walks in. And, New York is very, before even saying hello, it's more so, what do you do? And why are you in my face? It's very straight to the point. And he asked me what I did. Immediately, my mind started registering, okay, which elevator pitch is most relevant for the room I'm in, who I'm speaking to, and my intended outcome. And so I gave him my elevator pitch. And so the one that I centered on was around my ghostwriting agency. And he was like, oh, that's really interesting. I could use someone like you on my team. And literally right then and there, I would say within the next 10 days, we closed a $20,000 contract for a project that he needed help with.
Wow, that is incredible. I applaud you again for, I don't even think hustle is the right word, but just the resourcefulness and the foresight. I think that's what I'm really gathering from what you're sharing is you're able to think so much further ahead than the present moment you're in, right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I understand that I'm sacrificing a lot to make these trips back and forth to the States, but I understand that it's going to be worth it, like you said, down the line. And obviously, there are the times when you get that more immediate payoff, like your first five-figure contract. But I think that is such a key lesson that I think takes some entrepreneurs a long time to learn, which is, you know, you often can look at successful people and think, oh, they're lucky because they were in the right place at the right time. But not very many people really reverse engineer the situation around, but how were they in the right place at the right time? How do they place themselves into those
Right.
spaces and opportunities? And so I love that story. It's a perfect entryway into your roadmap now. And I just for the listeners to understand, we're going to be really looking at how Pollyanna, what key decisions or changes she made in the way that she, led and operated her agency that allowed it to go from that multiple six-figure range to that seven figures in annual revenue range. And I think this is the key hurdle that many entrepreneurs never cross because there is such a change, I think, in approach. Many people can hustle or work their way to multiple six figures, but without strategy, it's very difficult to move beyond that mark to $1 million or more in annual revenue. So Pollyanna was amazing and broke this down into four key arenas, I should say: team management, project management, client management, and brand management. So we're going to go through each of these. Let's start with that team management piece. What do you feel like really changed in how you hired and developed your team members that was different in your six-figure agency world versus your now seven-figure agency?
The first thing I did was that I removed myself from the process, from the hiring process. I think when you are within the six figure arena, you want to be besties with every employee, and you want to be, you think of it like a family. And when I made the transition, I actually got my teammates, my team members to start interviewing. Because if y'all don't like this new person, it's not going to work anyways. So I removed myself from the process because sometimes CEOs can hire off vibes. And that's not the right way to do things, right? And so for me, it was more so not even the resume was truly important. It was, could they fit into our company culture? Technical skills I can always train you on, but I want to know if you got that fight in you, if you align with our company mission, if you're married to the mission. I want to know if you're a people person. Can you work in teams? Like, what's your personality traits? Soft skills, right? Those are really important to me. So I was the last of three interviews in that process. In terms of team, I look for diversity, right? So when I say diversity, I mean diversity in thoughts, diversity in geography, diversity in background and experience, diversity. And let me give you an example of how this helped. So Ramadan, for instance, right? I had a CEO client, white male individual, leads a $500 million company. He wanted to send a company wide email, so spanning multiple countries, acknowledging Ramadan. And there are many other holidays and notes that he wanted to send. Now, he obviously doesn't have the cultural competency, but on my team, I have current tense, someone who is Muslim, someone who practices, someone who knows the language to use. And so for me, when I look for someone new on my team, I look for like, what blind spot can you remove from our vision? And that's really important to me. So you can have all the skills and be a phenomenal writer, but I have to cover a lot of ground so that if anyone comes to us, we're able to tackle the topic confidently. So there are people who may come to us to write their books, and they may have a specific request. I want to write with one of your writers who's a mother who understands single motherhood. We have, you know what I mean? So like, I think about all of that. We write about abuse, we talk about miscarriage, there's so many sensitive topics that we cover because we're storytelling. And it's important that I have women who have been through some shit, who have battle scars, and who have risen above it. And so it helps us, because in writing, whenever you take the audience down, you want to bring them back up. And so I look for those qualities in my team members.
It's really, I think, so intentional how your team is a reflection of your clients. That may be true for other CEOs that I've interviewed, but I think you're the first to really place such an emphasis on that. And that makes sense because of the topics, like you said, that you're writing about. Having firsthand experience, having that competency, like you mentioned, is going to always feel and come across differently than someone who simply did research on a subject.
Exactly. The other thing I think is really important is how I frame my one on ones. So there's a few things here. So, number one, the one on ones. Oftentimes, when you are part of a corporation, you only know 10% of what the CEO sees. So, I've decided to be way more transparent than most people with what my vision for the future is so that they feel very much included on the direction we're taking. The other thing I saw, so I won't credit myself, I'll credit Billions. Love that show, Billions in Succession. So when I was watching Billions, Axel, who was the head of his company, he had a therapist slash, she was a psychologist and a performance coach all in one. And I thought it was really interesting. I was like, like her job was really to make sure that the team had clarity and that they worked through any mind blocks so that they could make their most appropriate trades. And so I thought about that, and I thought about how we as a company touch so much sensitive subject matter. And I thought about the fact that my team members may not have the means or the accessibility to a therapist to come down from that high. And so I hired my own Wendy Rose, who's the character on Billions. And so we do group therapy sessions. I don't sit in the sessions. I allow, because I don't want anyone to edit how they feel. They also have access to her to book one-on-ones when they need to. And that's all in the company. And those are two things. So changing my one-on-ones and bringing in a therapist, an in-house therapist, to help them with anxiety, self-doubt, lack of confidence. Sometimes you just need someone to vent to. They're frustrated. Maybe they hate me for the day. Whatever they need, like, she's there to listen and to support.
That is amazing. I actually, speaking of one on ones, I'd like to get a little deeper into that.
Sure.
I've only had very limited experience in one-on-ones on the employee side, right? Like back in my one and only corporate job, I would have these weekly one-on-ones with my boss, and I remember them feeling very disorganized, oftentimes not a useful use of my
Yeah.
time. And I think that experience is quite universal for a lot of people. One-on-ones oftentimes are led by the actual employee sitting in the seat, kind of just like a hodgepodge of here's the random things that are going on and questions I have. I think this is an area that I could improve in as a leader myself. So I would love to know, how do you structure your one on ones? What do those look like, those conversations?
Sure. So I have one on ones with the team to accomplish two things. Number one, when you get onboarded, you get the onboarded package and the handbook and the mission. And oftentimes a company just articulates it one time and the employees kind of just like supposed to remember it and be like married to it and excited. Over time, that fizzles out. Over time, you may lose sight of what the company vision is. So the one on ones are really to revisit every time we meet. I go over why we're here, the importance, why our company exists, where we're headed. The other thing is I do more listening than I do speaking. In our last one-on-one session, everyone got a Q&A to fill out. And because I want to know the honest thoughts that's in your head, like how do you feel within your position? Are you still fired up? Where and how can I support you in your career? How does your time at our company fit into the bigger vision for your life? I have some people who have committed to being lifers, and I have some people who've made it very clear that they may move on to work on their personal projects. And so I want to know, so how can I position you to win in that transition? Oh, this is one of my favorite questions. Do you have any talents or skills that we can make better use of? I'll give you an example. I had an executive assistant a few years ago. She was CC'd on an email. I hired someone to do a PowerPoint presentation and I hated it. I mean, my assistant knew, like she just knew that it wasn't up to my standard. The next morning when I woke up, my assistant redid the presentation and she had been working with me for a few years at that point. I had no clue that she was a designer. Like, how is that even, like, girl, what? Like, and oftentimes, like, because it doesn't fit your job description, you may not raise your hand. And so I love asking that question because then you figure out people are passionate about marketing or they're passionate about, I don't know, like maybe a writer wants to work on a different type of project than they've been working on, maybe film and TV.
That is such a powerful question. I hope you all jotted that down. I know I also am now thinking, okay, how can I ask that, to my team? So I'm excited to ask that after our conversation today. How often do you have these one-on-ones with your team members?
So I talk to my team very, very often individually. Like I don't necessarily wait for a scheduled one-on-one to ask about their day, to find out, how their heart posture is, to find out what's going on in their life and their family. I would say we have quarterly one-on-ones like that are absolutely structured, that are recorded, that I deep dive into after I take notes, and that informs how we move forward as a company. But I talk to everyone honestly, like if not every day, most definitely every week on a personal note.
That's awesome. How do you balance that with, I'm just pulling from something you said earlier, that one of the key changes you believe allowed your company to move to the seven-figure scale was removing yourself from the hiring process, right? So, or until like the tail end, I should say, of the hiring process, because you are part of that final
Yeah.
interview.
Yeah.
How do you balance that with also being so in touch with different team members? I ask this because, I'm not sure the size of your team currently, so maybe that would be
About 20 people.
okay, awesome. So I mean, that's a large team, but it's not, 200 people large, right? So I can see how you can still have
Yeah.
one-on-one relationships with each of your team members. How do you balance being in close proximity or accessible to all of your team members while still keeping yourself in a place where you are not the bottleneck for, all of the conversations and things that are happening?
That's a really great question. So I'm still at a size where where it is manageable. I have been an employee at companies where the CEO was like this like wicked witch of the West, and like you almost like never heard, never saw them, and then when they did show up on the office, people were on their best behavior, and it was very inauthentic. I want my team
Yeah.
to know that they can come to me at any given time. Like an open door policy is like very important to me. Now I have a co-pilot. Right. I've had business partners in the past. I've had 3 in 10 years that did not work out. It was like having a bitter divorce. So I realized that I don't need a co-founder per se. Having a co-pilot, a CEO, a chief of staff, someone who encompasses those skill set, and I have a phenomenal, phenomenal person in that role. She also acts as a buffer between us. So sometimes they may feel more comfortable going to her first, and then collectively they decide if they want to if they want to settle the issue or bring it to me. But in terms of a quick question, in terms of, clarity, like I'm okay with being a point person, but we have a very collaborative process for each project. So there's always a kickoff call. We have a WhatsApp group for each project. I use WhatsApp over Slack. I'm not a fan of Slack. The one model we over communicate. Like that's such a non-negotiable. We're communicators who work in communications. We need to have effective communication between all of us. So it's something that we're constantly working on, but it's very manageable because of the size of my team. And I have a co-pilot that helps with the load as well. So that's very important because a lot of CEOs are solo dolo at the top. It's the CEO and then everyone reports to them.
Yeah, I can see how that could be really helpful, especially at your team size. Let's talk about project management a bit, your second pillar, if you will, of what allowed you to really make that scale to seven figures. So, project management that encompasses obviously campaigns and projects that you're working on, but also the overall company systems, workflows, things like that. What do you feel was the biggest change in how you tackled this area of your business versus how you were as a six-figure agency owner?
This is a really great question because every project is, if you don't get a handle on it, it can be very chaotic. Deadlines can be missed, and all of that has happened. So I would say, so we have a dedicated research team at the company. They're also called quality assurance, quality control. And so having a point person who leads, so they're not really I would say, yeah, okay, they do double as a project manager, but their main function is to make sure that the language spoken between the clients and between our team is on one accord, and to make sure that all the wrinkles are ironed out, so by the time it gets to me as the final eyes on the project, it's damn near perfect. But having, even though we have a collaborative process, having one person who is the anchor to the project has been really important. Having your team respect that individual as the anchor and the leader is very important. Removing myself from, and I'm still working on this, removing myself from the nitty gritty and like trusting my team to execute. Like one thing I will say is my team, when it comes to projects, like if we don't work on a 9 to 5 schedule, I'm available to my clients 24/7. And my team, there are many, many nights where we pull all nighters, right? And we have a no woman left behind policy. So it's never like one person in the middle of the night working. There's always a team member or team members alongside her on Zoom. When we were writing the speech for the funeral I mentioned earlier, there were 7 of us on Zoom up until 5 a.m., right? And so I think that oftentimes like projects fall apart when there's really no collaborative or team effort where everyone has each other's back. You know what I mean? Like, so in terms of functionality though, I mean, we have SOPs. We try our best to stick to them, but obviously there's one-off cases where we have to pivot. But everyone knows and understands. My job as a CEO is to make sure everyone is empowered to do their job. They fully know and understand their strengths and their function, and everyone stays within their lane. There's really no overlap, so you don't get a lot of conflict.
I have a follow-up question about the anchor piece. So that was something you implemented that you feel
Yeah.
changed your ability to scale. How do you choose your anchor? Is it a different person for each project? Is it always the research project manager person? And if it is rotating, again, how do you select who the right anchor is for a particular project, especially if their primary role isn't to be a project manager?
Okay, so when a client comes in and they articulate their need, I then look at the background and the skill set of the team. So the QC team, the quality control team, as well as the writer, the transcriber, the graphic designer, whoever is needed. And so in our SOP, it's very clear that the QC team, they are the eyes and ears, the nose and the mouth. Like they are the person who is to lead the project, because they have to both not only know and understand and research the clients and know them like the back of their hand, but they also have to make sure that the writer is very aware of all the key pieces so they can execute the job. So it's more so background. It's also level of experience. It's also availability. And I would say I try to pair a QC with a writer, and they work consistently together long term. So that also helps as well. So like, because oftentimes when you are on a project at a larger corporation, for different projects, you may have different members, and you're not able to function smoothly. So at our company, like you pretty much work with the same people quite often, unless there may be a one-off case, but you have a partner. It's almost like I watch a lot of Law and Order and Criminal Minds. Like, it's like when you have two cops, like they're road dogs. Like they're fighting crime together. This is my partner. I've been with this partner 10 years. And so we have that dynamic.
Can't get more iconic than Benson and Stabler, right? As
Love
as
it.
2 partners in crime, but so true, and that makes sense because you learn the nuances of a specific person, how they communicate, how they
Mhm.
think, and I love that pairing that quality control in the writer, the doer and the, kind of like the thinker of the structural process, and so I think that's really applicable to many businesses, even those of you who don't run an agency if you're listening to this, but thinking about how can you pair your core team members in ways that allow them to grow over time through multiple different projects. I really love that. I also want to reflect back on a point you made just a moment ago about the no woman left behind policy. I love that you all, when there is that time sensitivity or time crunch for a project that you all are, like you said, you were all on that Zoom call together till 5 in the morning. It reminds me of my college days and right before midterms or finals when we're all in the library pulling an all-nighter.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it feels so much better when you have your friends with you, right? So I understand and so appreciate that. On the flip side, I'd love to get your hot take on this. The agency world in general, not just in your particular sector, but
It's very chaotic.
yeah, it is very chaotic. There's high churn, high burnout rates because it is so around the clock. It is so client first demands. Obviously, you as a leader have made a choice for you to be available to your clients 24/7. Not all businesses can or want to operate that way, but for yourself, building a business with that approach, how do you make sure that your team members or yourself don't get burnt out trying to be always on for your clients?
Yeah, I love this question because I do have friends and colleagues who are CEOs, and like I'll email them and get a bounce back. Oh, the automatic will return the email within 24 to 48 hours. Like, honey, I'm where the bag is at. Like, my clients can text me, call me 2 a.m. I don't care. Like, I'm okay with that, right? As far as my team, I tell my team, listen, sometimes I have an idea in my head and I just need to get it out. I don't expect you to return the response. That's number one. Number two, that's also why I brought the therapist on the team because I know this world can be very stressful. Number three, there's no cap when it comes to like the vacation time or when they need to take it. Like, I mean, if we're in the middle of a project, I think that's obvious. But I always tell them if you need to take time off, mental health day, take a whole week, throw it in my calendar. As long as you, again, it's everything is interconnected. As long as you touch base with the members of your team and everything is covered, I have no issue. And they will tell you, I have no issue. I have one of my team members, leaving for a month because she has to travel and prepare for some other personal things. That's cool. Just make sure all bases are covered. And so that's the beauty of having each other's back is that if someone leaves, we have coverage all around. So, and that's also why I need to have diversity in my team because we can cover bases when necessary. But yeah, I always tell people, listen, celebrity ghostwriting sounds really fun and interesting, but it's still an agency model and it still can be very demanding. I can't tell you how many times I've received phone calls urgently because someone needs a public statement written within the next hour, or I'm working on crisis comms for a corporation, and it's like, I know I'm not going to sleep for the next 3 days, right? And so there's just a general understanding of what we've gotten ourselves into, and we're all trying to navigate it the best way we can. If agency life is not for you, you are free to go. But this train is pushing forward. So I know, like sensitively, I know everyone, rejects hustle culture, but baby, I'm still a hustler at heart. Like I grew up in a family that did not celebrate participant ribbons. You are one or you are none. So for me, I just look at things a lot differently. I love to work. I'm obsessed with my work. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing than working. And I take care of myself too. My friends will always preach to me, you take better care of yourself. I work out 4 times a week. Every afternoon, I'm in the bed. I'm taking a nap right after this interview. Like I make the time and space. I cut out fast food. Like my diet is phenomenal. Like I do think it's important, and I think CEOs can implement changes into their lifestyle that help. So if I get a call at 2 a.m., I can be there because I've kind of done what I needed to do to make sure that mentally, emotionally, physically, I'm sound.
I really appreciate the honest picture that you've painted for what works for you specifically. And I think that's what's so cool about not only your story, but anyone who sits in your seat that we have a conversation with is my hope is that for our listeners, they really understand that entrepreneurship is so much a game of personalization. And the whole reason many of us go into business for ourselves is so that we can build something that prioritizes what we care about and allows us to live a life that we are fulfilled in. And so I love that you are willing to stand against maybe popular belief, because I mean, it swings
Yeah.
both ways, right? There was a time when the entire world was like hustle culture or nothing. And then now we're kind of swinging to the opposite end of the pendulum where a lot of people are like, I want as much space and
Soft life.
yeah, as many boundaries and white space as possible, but that's not for everyone. So I appreciate you staying authentic to who you are and showcasing that you're able to work really, really hard, but still prioritize things that matter to you, like your health and your daily naps, which I love and can so relate to. All right, let's go ahead and move now into client management. We've talked a lot about the internal processes of your team. I know this is where you really shine. So you obviously work with very high profile clients, like you all have already shared. Sometimes the work that incurs because of that can be very last minute or high demand. What do you feel like changed in the way that you managed or acquired your clients from six-figure agency to seven-figure agency?
What has changed? Okay, so at the top of our interview, we mentioned that I was in the lobby of a building, bing, bing, bap, like I landed the deal. But I also think what is really important is patience. So one of my mentors connected me to a woman who I've been wanting to work with for a very long time. And I had emailed her consistently for a year and 3 months. Okay. And after a year and three
Wow.
months, she finally agreed to meet with me. And we met at Soho House in Toronto. And she said, "You are the most persistent person I've ever met. You remind me of myself." And she said, "Send me the invoice. I'll make sure you're financially taken care of." I think it's really important to let people know that sometimes you'll close the deal right away. Sometimes it requires nurturing for several weeks, months, maybe even years. So send the text, send the email, right? Like, I think people are just afraid to ask for the business. I think people are also, sometimes you can move too quickly that you'll miss clues. Right. So I think, we've all heard the saying success leaves clues. So, like, I could listen to a 1 hour talk, for instance, one of the former CEOs of Soul Cycle. I could listen to a 1 hour talk. I'm obsessed with watching them on YouTube. And she had mentioned something about not being good at English. Automatically, I'm like, okay, we got to get in touch with her. You know what I mean? Like, I look out for clues in interviews. I look out for clues in social captions and in videos. And there are times where I may cold approach someone's team and explore the idea of what it could look like to work together. Most of the time, people do come to me as well through our website. So I think people underestimate the power of SEO. I have an SEO analyst on my team. Could I articulate what he does? Maybe it is so complex, but I went from being non existent on Google to now being on the first page with agencies that are 10 times bigger in size. That was the first thing. So it's very easy for people to find me. The second thing is LinkedIn has been a phenomenal. Do not sleep on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where the bag is at. LinkedIn is where you can find people by title. LinkedIn is where decision makers live. LinkedIn people are so responsive. I feel like Instagram is like the playground. LinkedIn is where you have to grow up and have sophisticated conversation. I have closed deals without even getting on the phone with people. So a LinkedIn is also a very phenomenal channel. And honestly, look in your phone. I'm like an old school door to door salesman. I love just looking in my phone. I looked in my contact. When it comes to networking, oh, I don't like that word, but for the sake of the interview, when it comes to networking and building relationships with people, I have a spreadsheet. I'm very intentional, right? So my spreadsheet consists of the basics, so name, company, your email. And then I also have columns for when was the last time we touched base? What did I learn from that conversation so I can personalize the next one? Column for whether or not you're a hot, warm, or cold lead, and a column for whether or not you are a high or low priority. When I was an executive assistant, my CEO and president bosses, 80% of the time, they were in meetings, flying around the world, having dinners, having coffees, building relationships, and they would bring home the business. A lot of the deals that I have attained, so whether it was writing for the CMO at BET, writing for one of the presidents at Disney, writing a script for one of the hosts at The View. Like, it's been really interesting. Those have come through just organic conversation, touching base with people. A text to say what's up goes a very long way. It doesn't even always have to be a Zoom meeting. Sometimes I'll just leave a note in the subject line: "Hey, girl, thinking about you. Let's touch base soon." Right? Like, you don't overthink the process, but I think most people are just unorganized when it comes to managing their contact list. Don't ever assume that your friends know what you do. My capabilities deck, oh, that's another tool that was really important. My capabilities deck has been a phenomenal tool. Most busy people, they're not trying to scroll through a website. I'm sorry. Most busy people, they like the deck because they can easily circulate it, they can easily skim it. And that has landed me a ton of deals as well. We talk about client management. We also talk about identifying your red flags, your qualification process. I've had, oh my gosh, just yesterday I declined a job. 2 years ago, I declined $100,000 job because I had to walk away from the job simply because there's too many red flags. And you, again, you define what red flags mean to you, you define what your non negotiables are. But when you're early on in your business, I think, when you're in your six-figure bag, you say yes to a lot of things because you're trying to just, you're on a hamster wheel. When you have a business that's more sophisticated, you're in power, you're in charge. There's so much confidence in saying no. So that has also been really helpful. Qualification process. How do you determine whether the client is the right fit? So tightening up on that, asking better questions. And then I'll also say, delivering on your brand's promise. Clients work with us because of white glove service, because of the speed in which we work, because of our creative genius, our zone of genius. Like, it's just, you're just not going to find another agency of color. So clients like to work with us because there's a comfort in knowing that, honestly, when a woman's on your team, it's a winning strategy. When there's a woman of color on your team, I mean, you're in your bag. And we just, the thing is, like, they can trust us. You know what I mean? Like, we just built these relationships over time. So how you manage with a client, how you make them feel, the white glove service, that's why we like to go above and beyond, because clients come back again and again because they know what they're going to get. If they're not, it's never spotty. There's been so many times I've received clients because they had a very poor experience at another agency.
There's so much gold in what you just shared. I mean,
I know, I'm so sorry.
no, no, don't apologize. I was keeping track of certain. No, 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 there is no apologies necessary for that. I appreciate that you are efficient, right? You're like, "Let me tell you all the things," and that's so helpful, honestly. The things that really stood out to me, one, success leaves clues. I love that you're so diligent about noticing opportunity. I think that in and of itself is a
Yeah,
huge talent. So many people miss incredible opportunities because they discount either the thing in front of them themselves, or they're just not paying attention. And the fact that you take note of those little details. I mean, I would challenge each of you to approach your next week of work with Pollyanna's mindset and look for clues that point to people maybe silently asking or even screaming for help that you're not noticing, and take the initiative to reach out and say, "Hey, I noticed that you said this or you mentioned this or this happened to you, and I would love to whatever it is. I would love to connect with you. I would love to tell you about this thing. I would love to help you with whatever it is." So that was nugget number one. Nugget number two that I feel I want to actually get more details on is that one woman that you emailed for 1 year and 3 months.
yeah.
Persistence, right? That persistence game. Tell us, how did you repeatedly email this woman without, for lack of a better word, annoying her? What were those reach outs like? Were you just constantly being like, "Hey, thinking of you," touching base, or did each interaction look a little bit different? And how did you pace that? How did you decide what to say each time so it felt different to her?
That's an excellent question. Reducing stress and adding value. So I was keenly interested in her career. I'd follow her on social media. I'd read the captions. I was locked in. And so there was a post one day, just to give you one example, there was a post where she was talking about her desire to do more public speaking. And so there are times where I'd email her and I would include a link to a conference that she could apply to, or I would give her feedback on some of the video content, because I've been a public speaker since 2012. I give her feedback on how she can approach opportunities. I make a suggestion, maybe you should consider designing and making a media kit. So it's a snapshot of your zone of genius. So reducing stress and adding value is how I've been able to get into any room. So, like, I have a lot of high profile mentors. And one of the questions when I was in my 20s and nobody knew my name and I was just building my credibility, one of the questions I'd ask myself is, am I the type of woman that world-class performers would actually wanna fuck with, right? And what is that what qualities and characteristics does that woman embody, and who do I need to be? What are the things I need to do? How do I need to see the world and myself, the confidence and the heart posture I need to walk in? And I do that. Those are the things that I do, whatever that looks like, right? And so that's what gets me in the room. That's what welcomes me into the conversation. That's why my mentors and sponsors, they nominate me and advocate for me because how I move is dictated by the answer to that question.
That is so powerful. Okay, that's our journal prompt for the day, everybody. We're all gonna journal on this together and think about how can I be the person that these people I wanna be in a room with
Mhm.
would want to associate with, would
Yeah.
wanna work with. That's so, so good. I love that. I also wanted to go a little deeper on 2 other things you mentioned. One is the white glove service, one is the red flags and asking better qualification questions to ensure that you are working with the right clients. So, let's start with the white glove service first. People toss out that term all the time. They often don't really share what that actually looks like in practice. So for you, what are the extra things that you do for your clients that you feel like encompass that white glove service?
The first thing that I do is I go beyond the scope of work every time. Like, I'm never limited to, like, you have CEOs and companies that are so rigid with, well, you're paying me for this, so this is where it ends. And I get it. You're doing that for, like, honestly, for your sanity in most cases. But one thing that helps me is that I'm very resourceful. So we may be working on project A, but a client has a question about branding, about marketing, about content creation. Everything that we do for clients is actually a very big part of my personal brand. And so the reason why clients hire me, my company, over any other competitors is the fact that I've been an EA for 10 years. So that shows them how organized I am. The fact that I've been a personal brand for 10 years, so public speaker, writer, etc., influence, and the fact that I have market value, which we'll talk about, we can pin that later. White glove service to me looks like going above and beyond, simply above and beyond what's on the contract. So if I jump on a call with the client because the client has questions about any of the above, I'm going to do it because to me, honestly, I know this shit like the back of my hand. It's nothing for me to jump on a call for an hour. Like, I'm not going to bill you for the hour. It's like, I know you got me in a future project. Like, it's almost like I want to say my clients aren't family per se, but we're really good friends. So a client of mine wanted me to write a book, and she's like, okay, you know everything about my life, but before we get started on this project, I want to know how you see the world. And so oftentimes clients challenge me because they want to know behind the curtain. They want to know about my mental health issues that I've lived with my whole life. They want to know about why I dropped out of college. They want to know about, some of the strong opinions I have about hustle culture, right? And so they just really appreciate it. I have clients who have approached me that are like, I'm going to hire you because I got lost in your content. Like, I love what you stand for. And so white glove service comes easy when you actually like who you're working with. You find it very enjoyable. And white glove also looks like, when I say going the extra mile, it could be after we write a speech for a client, we always do a table read. Right. We make sure they're comfortable with the delivery. We coach them through the delivery, giving advice, giving advisory services when they need it. Like, a client could call me in the middle of the night with an urgent matter, and I'm not automatically looking at them like an ATM or thinking about the numbers. I'm helping them, and we're going to deal with that shit in a second. We'll deal with it tomorrow or whatever. And it's just the way we organize ourselves. Most businesses lose clients because of disorganization. Like, it's simply I refer, for instance, I have a friend who's a lawyer, God bless her heart. I referred another friend to her, and my friend was like, I can't work with her because she still uses PDFs. Like, she doesn't use DocuSign, for instance, right? It's so, like, literally small changes in how you present information to your client. We use Google Drive, right? We are meticulous with how we label documents, how we label folders, like even how we present documents. It has our logo at the top. It has prepared for, prepared by, and the date in the header. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just how we present, and clients are like, wow, like, they took the time, they took the care to execute.
It's all about that extra attention to detail. I couldn't agree more. It really makes someone feel taken care of. And I love that law of reciprocity that you live by, where you're not worried about in that moment what is this hour costing me? You see it from my viewpoint of you sharing this, you see it as an investment. Like you're crediting that account and saying, I know it's going to come back to me later because I'm building that relationship. So I really respect that. And as far as the qualification process, you mentioned asking better questions. What is one key question that you ask all of your potential clients before deciding to work with them that you feel like anyone who's a service provider, agency owner, or just business owner should be aware of and should start using in their own business?
Sure. One of the questions that I ask is, how does this particular project fit into the larger vision and strategy for your brand? Because
Mm,
oftentimes clients will be very nearsighted and oftentimes they're very last minute. So they're scrambling and like, I need this, I need that. And it's like the chaos starts right from the onset. But I want to know the
right.
larger picture because the larger picture helps me and informs my next steps on how to advise you. And most of the
Mhm.
time, they haven't even thought about the larger picture of the vision, and so it's really important to me that we nail that down before we even start or before we even sign any paperwork. And so my intro call, I know oftentimes I have so many friends that their intro call is limited to 15 minutes, like because everyone's so time sensitive. No, I'm gonna hold space for you because even if we are not aligned, I may know a referral who can help you. You may hire me down the road. Like I'm really big on maintaining relationships with clients that are not a fit, right? Just because you say no because of lack of money, lack of time, or just we're just not aligned, it doesn't mean that we no longer have to converse. Like I'm going to give you the half an hour, I'm going to advise you however I can. And you know what? I have a list of clients who we didn't align for whatever reason. I check up on them every quarter. Hey girl, how are you doing? Let me know how your project's been going. I've been really, I'm looking forward to an update. Simple things like that make people remember you. I had a
Yeah.
client who recently signed with me. It's a 5-figure project. And she said, so when one question I always ask is, how did you find us? And she said, you and I had a conversation 10 years ago that I never forgotten. And that's it.
Wow.
And she's like, I knew that when I wanted to start my brand and business, you were the person I needed to hire. From 10 years ago, I personally did not remember the conversation, remember her, but it just goes to show you that because we hadn't talked since that conversation, I'll say that. But it just goes to show you like every interaction with every client and every prospect matters. Even the people that cannot afford your services, don't treat them like a doormat, right? They still have feelings, they still have dreams and potential. And you don't know when any potential client, when their situation is going to change. Okay. That's the other thing. Don't sleep on people who are not ready yet.
100%, because like you said, they could just be in a different stage, right? And who knows where or who or what they'll be doing,
Yeah.
who they'll be in the next few months, few years. And so I really appreciate, again, it goes back to what I said before. I think you just have a very long-term mindset, which is such a huge strength and advantage. And I really want to commend you for that. And I really hope that that's one of the things that our listeners take away from this conversation today.
Thank you very much for that.
Oh my gosh, of course. No, you should be so encouraged by that woman who remembered you from a decade ago. Like, that is insane. I feel like you covered so many great behind the scenes, real things that you're doing in your business for us today. I know that fourth pillar was all about brand management. I feel like you've actually kind of woven that in throughout, our conversations today. But I did want to end this case study with one last hot take, specifically in the brand management arena of your business. So all about your personal brand as a CEO, obviously, and then your brand of WritersBlok at large. You had a hot take that not the only thing, but one of the accelerants to scaling to 7 figures as an agency was attending less conferences and instead investing in more mentors and advisors. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Absolutely. So I think that people are very attracted to the noise. Everyone's a guru, everyone's a teacher. It's very easy to get very caught up. And so I think conferences are important for the mere fact that it's good to be in rooms with like minded individuals, but you don't always get the juice and the specific information and insight you need. A lot of times, I've been to many of the staple conferences. You go there and like you're most people are there to see the celebrity on stage and like you're not getting the meat and potatoes. So like tapping into specialists instead of generalists will help change the game for you. Sitting at the
Yeah.
feet of our elders and mentors, don't underestimate the power in that. I actually have an uncle, he's 80 years old, a serial entrepreneur. I'm about to spend a whole day with him next week, right? Like, I think it's really important, whether it's, our elders or mentors, like, really figure out like what qualities in an individual is aligned with you. And at different stages of their career. I mean, my uncle, he's 80, he's still kicking and has a storied career, but I also have mentors who are a few levels above me, right? So, like, you want to make sure that there's range. The other thing that has helped me is market value. So, Amanda Seals often talks about your self worth versus your market value. Now, your self worth is like how you feel about yourself when you look in the mirror. Your market value is how other people perceive you. And a lot of times you may look at another woman, you may say, like, wow, like she's really leapfrog steps in her career. It's because she's made strategic, calculated moves to increase her market value. And an example that I think is obvious in my career is, I'm a longtime journalist. I have one foot in the door, phasing out completely. And one of the reasons I'm still in the media world is simply because we need more people of color in the space to hold the door open. But I'm widely known for my work as a senior journalist at Forbes, a freelance reporter. And I could have written for any publication, but the fact that I chose the number one publication in the world, the best publication, my market value has skyrocketed. So when I'm going into conversations and introductory calls with prospects, I really don't have to do a lot of talking because I not only am I a senior freelance reporter at Forbes, I'm ranked in the 1% of the global writing network, right? So like when there's certain things on your resume, the other thing that increases my market value, most people don't even know, but I teach at a college part-time. I teach professional communications, still in my field. I'm very passionate about youth education and children's literacy, but it increases my market value because now you know that I can teach the subject matter in my zone of genius at a finer technical level. So like when you are,
Mhm.
I think it's very important for CEOs to still keep sharp, stack their resumes, and be very strategic. The last thing I'll say is community. A lot of my business literally comes from my online community because I'm very consistent with them. So as company owners, oftentimes the people on social media is doesn't necessarily meet our customer avatar. It's too bit like, what I mean? You operate kind of different because, online my community consists of, women empowerment, millennials, like I share a lot of business advice. And then my clients are very high profile. Honestly, most of them don't even have social media like that. They're in the world making change. And so my community, I keep them informed with what's happening in my career, what's happening in my life, what my desires are, and they rock the boat for me. Like for instance, there was another podcast who was like, "What women should we interview?" And I had maybe 3 dozen people tag me in that post, right? So like you have to involve your community and let them know what's happening in your business because they will ride for you. They will tag you, they will nominate you for the award, they'll recommend to their colleague. You don't know who their auntie or their mama or their sister is. Like you don't know who they're connected to. So tap into your community, make them a priority, keep them involved. And I think that kind of wraps up brand management piece. Stay visible, let people know what you're doing.
I think what I most admire about you, appreciate about you, Pollyanna, is your strong belief in the value of every single person you interact with. I think that's been a theme throughout our entire conversation. You practice it in so many ways. And I think that is what makes you so successful. I love, by the way, your distinction of how your online community may not always be your ideal clients, but that doesn't mean they can't be your best advocates. I think that's something that more people could really learn from and appreciate more in their own business. And so I have absolutely loved our conversation today. Thank you for showing up with such
Thank you.
heart and transparency and encouraging other women of color like myself to really take a place in the media world. As you know from being a listener of our show, that's been a transition we've worked on over the last year, and it is a hard space to break into, without that particular professional background. But I'm so encouraged by the work I get to do telling stories of incredible women like you. So Pollyanna, where can our listeners continue to connect with you and explore more of your world?
Absolutely. You can Google my name, Pauleanna Reid, my website, pauleannareid.com, and my company website, the WritersBlok without the C.com.
Amazing. And we'll drop those links below for you in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Thank you.